mothers would be proud. We say what's on our mind, no matter who we tear down. Ooh, I've got something to do. You know that I'm smarter than you, so just let me do my thing. It's the best thing for you. I know I can hear you, I know you can hear me. All of this noise and no one is listening. Keep talking louder, make them the enemy. All of this noise and no one is listening. I'm as guilty as the next man. I've got something brilliant to say, so please do not interrupt me. I can't let truth get in the way. I know I can hear you, I know you can hear me. All of this noise and no one is listening. Keep talking louder, make them the enemy. All of this noise and no one is listening. I know I can hear you, I know you can hear me. All of this noise and no one is listening. Keep talking louder, make them the enemy. All of this noise and no one is listening. No one is listening. No one is listening. I know I can hear you, I know you can hear me. All of this noise and no one is listening. Keep talking louder, make them the enemy. All of this noise and no one is listening. No one is listening. No one is listening. Ooh, no one is listening. No one is listening. It's a losing game. The outcome's always the same. Nobody wins, but I play anyway. Swing for the fences, but they're too far away. Let's play it again. What would it take to make
Hey everybody, welcome. Sorry, I'm late. It's always something around here. For some reason, when I take my hard drive somewhere else on my laptop and bring it back, it renames itself and adds a 1 to the end of the name. And everything doesn't get recognized, which is super annoying. I don't know if it's a different operating system thing or what. So, since I'm so late, we're going to forego any silly intro. I'm not really in the mood to do one anyway, so we're just going to do a simple intro. Something like... I don't even know what episode this is. This is what, 232? No, we'll do one. We'll do a quick... I already had an idea for one, so I lied before. If you're new, this is a podcast, and I do an intro every week. Okay, here we go. Let's see.
Here comes Joe. You ask a question.
That's not it. That's it. Let's do it again.
Here comes Joe. You ask your questions, and I will answer them.
Hooray! That was silly. But it'll work. Let's see.
Here comes a cold. Here comes Joe.
Oh no, I gotta do it. Sorry, I gotta do it one more. I realized what I wanted it to be. Hold please. Okay.
Here comes Joe. You ask your questions and I answer them like I always do.
That wasn't much. Yeah, we're good. We're good.
Here comes Joe. You ask your questions and I answer them like I always do.
That'll work.
Like I always do.
All right, that's a wrap. We got ourselves an intro. Thank you, 10-year-old John Mayer. 10, that's like 18 years old. That's crazy how old that song is. Anyway, I'm getting ready to get started, so episode number, yeah, that would have been good to do. Too late. All right, I'll be back in about 8 seconds. Let me start this recording.
Here
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. I missed you last week. Sorry, I didn't really make an announcement that I wasn't doing an episode last week because I was gone to West Virginia and I had a lot of fun. And I'll tell you a little bit about that trip because it was super cool. And then we'll get into your questions. If this is your first time ever hanging out with me on Tuesdays at 1 p.m., you should mark your calendar or get the calendar. Subscribe to my calendar. Go to homestudiocorner.com/calendar on your cell phone device, and then you can subscribe, and then I'll show up on your phone. It'll be super annoying because it'll pop up with a reminder, and it'll tell you that it's time to come to Ask Joe, and then you come hang out with us and be with the cool kids. Anyway, the last week I was in the great state of West Virginia, up in the mountains, out of cell phone range from the entire world. But I was there as a part of Ronan Chris Murphy's mountain recording retreat. So Ronan's been doing this. This is the third year in a row where they've done this retreat at this just retreat like center resort place in the middle of nowhere out in the mountains where you have like dinners together, family style at a big table. There's a golf course. And then we were doing a bunch of different classes and workshops and cool stuff like that around everything having to do with audio. So I was there presenting as one of the mentors of the week, and I had 3 2-hour sessions, and I went into it with this plan of like, we're going to write a song in the first session and record it in the second one and mix it in the third, and that sounded like fun to me. Then I realized that wouldn't work very well, and when I got there, I realized one of the things that we were doing a lot of was a lot of listening sessions where we would sit, usually at night, we'd go into the room, and they had actually a nice set of Neumann studio monitors in this room we were using, and we would plug in people's music and listen, and we would all give feedback. And one thing I noticed, and I've noticed a lot just in general doing what I do with Home Studio Corner, is a lot of times if I'm giving a mix critique to somebody, usually there's some things I'm going to say about the mix, obviously, but a lot of times the stuff that I'm talking about for the majority of the critique is production stuff. So if it's something that you've recorded and produced yourself, there are so many things that you need to get right in the recording and production phase that will make the mixing thing way easier and it'll make the mixes better. There's so many songs I listen to where from the beginning of the song through to the end is just exactly the same. The song starts, it's 2 guitars, bass, drums, vocals, and nothing changes for 4.5 minutes. That makes it feel like about a 13-minute song. Now, if it's amazing players and there's something that just keeps you engaged that whole time, great. But for me, and what I've experienced over the years, both being on both sides of producing a lot of music, I've released 50 songs in the last decade, to being the engineer for other people's music and producing them, and then a lot of the mixing that I've done, there is stuff you can do in the production side of things to make the songs infinitely more interesting, way more listenable, and also it makes the mixes better. See, we spend so much time, you probably spend so much time looking up the new mixing plugins, new mixing tutorials, new mixing tricks and hacks, when your real problem with your mixes is they're just boring. And you've got to learn to record more interesting parts so that by the time, the goal for me when I'm done with the recording phase of a song is for it to sound like a hit, to already sound amazing and mixed. That way, then when I go to mix, I've got less work to do. Does that sound daunting? Does it sound maybe impossible? Yeah, I never get there, but that's my goal, is to have this sound like a hit record before I ever go to mix it. And one concept that I shared last week that I'll share with you right now, so I gotta do it really quick, is to imagine your productions like a triangle. A triangle that looks like this. So like a right triangle that's tipped over on its side. Can you see that? And so your song starts over here, and there's not much happening, or maybe there's a lot for the intro, then it drops back. And then as you go through, if you watch the session, a lot of my sessions, you'll see it gets bigger as you go to the right. So it starts small, and then by the last chorus, there's a bunch more stuff happening. Now, you can't just add stuff for the sake of adding stuff, but in general, I find that little triangle mode of production keeps me from keeping everything exactly the same. I'm always adding things in. Verse 1 and verse 2 are different, and then chorus 1 and chorus 2 are different. The bridge is even more different, has more stuff, and then the final chorus is huge and has kind of everybody is in for an all skate. Now, you can't do that on every type of song, but I've done it on big, huge productions. I've done it on tiny acoustic productions, and it really does help make the song more interesting, and it makes it a heck of a lot more fun to mix as well. So, that's my tip for you today. Boom. The only thing that would have made that boom more fun would be if I had something to drink right after it, like a defiant swig of coffee, slam it down. So I'm here for you. I'm here to answer your questions. So tell me what's on your mind. What are you struggling with? Where are you banging your head against a wall, so to speak? And maybe I can jump in and give you some advice or some tips to help. I've got a few questions in here already. If you already asked your question, feel free to ask it again, because I'm not going to scroll back up through all of your shenanigans as you're making fun of my John Mayer skills at the beginning of the podcast. Lazarus Mind says, how long have you been playing guitar? 20 years? 22 years? Wow. It makes me sad that I've been old enough to do anything that long. That's crazy. But yeah, it's been a really long time. Taught myself out of the first song I learned was I Can Love You Like That by John Michael Montgomery. My dad had the sheet music, and it had the lead sheet with the little chord diagrams above each chord. So it said C, and then above it had the little chart. And so I would mash my fingers down where the Ted said to put my fingers. And I was horrible. It was amazing. How was the recording retreat? It was super great, Gary. Tim is awesome. I haven't seen him in years. You should come sometime, or we should do our own thing. Let's see. Somebody's here from Myanmar. Is it Myanmar or Myanmar? Myanmar. But it's 12:30 a.m. there. Ong Sithu, I appreciate you staying up late and hanging out with us. That means awesome. Fun with Kuldeep says, tell us something about mastering. You don't have to go super loud. One of the interesting things, and I don't follow a lot of this, if you really want to know mastering, follow Ian Shepherd and listen to the Mastering Show podcast and take his home mastering masterclass as well. But what's interesting kind of following what Ian's talking about lately is a lot of the services like YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, they're all kind of taking this whole loudness war thing into their own hands. So if you submit your stuff and it's way too loud, above a certain level, they're going to turn it down anyway. And we've all seen the examples where you take the same mix and you master it louder and louder and louder. If you level match it afterwards, most people will pick the more dynamic master, so we'll say it sounds better and punchier once you level match everything. Of course, we're going to think that anything louder sounds better, but when you realize that there's already some level matching and Spotify is going to turn your song down anyway, gives you the freedom to just let it be. Like, don't just crush it to death with mastering. On the flip side, I like the way a hot master sounds as well. Like, I like the energy that comes from hitting a limiter some, right? So, and I've mastered stuff that I feel like is too quiet and stuff that I don't think I've ever gone too loud. So my stuff tends to come out on the quieter end of things, which I think is good because there's this thing called a volume knob that you can always turn up. Another thing about mastering, I love, love, love the movie The Greatest Showman and the soundtrack. It's phenomenal. I don't know if it's because it was for a movie, but there's a big dynamic range there to the point where the final song on the album, when we're in the car, I have to turn the volume as high as it will go, and I can still sort of hear that first verse where it's just him and a piano. It's really beautiful. And then when the guitars and everything come in, I have to turn it way down. To me, that's could stand a little more overall level. I would give up some dynamic range to be able to hear the song without having to adjust my volume knob throughout the album. But it's a soundtrack, so I feel like they get a pass. Street Kicker says, how do you do high quality sounds? Mine always sound like 2-bit. Shh. We're going to bleep that out so I can still say this is a non-profanity podcast. How do you do high quality sounds? So that's a big question, and having not like sat down with you, if you're talking about like virtual sounds, then it really does come down to what samples you're using, what virtual instruments you're using and all that. I don't live in that world, so I can't really speak to that. If you're talking about real sounds like voice in front of a microphone or guitar in front of a microphone or amp in front of a microphone, if you notice the trend, I'm a big fan of putting microphones in front of things. In that scenario, my mantra is get it right at the source. What is the source? Well, the source is the instrument itself. Let's talk about my voice. First, the song has to be good. Before I even sing the song, it needs to be a good song with a good melody. Then the performance needs to be good. So I've got to be a decent singer. If I sound like doo-doo in the room when you listen to me sing, no amount of magic with a microphone and fancy plugins is going to fix that. So that has to be in place. Then when you're putting a microphone up, it's got to be a good microphone for the voice. It's got to be in the right place, right placement, decent preamp, nice treatment after the fact. But it all starts upstream at the source itself. Right now, like people say, Joe, your voice on your podcast sounds so smooth. How do you do that? And I'm kind of like, ask the Lord, because this is just the way my voice sounds. It happens to be, I have a good speaking voice. My dad has this big, booming bass voice, and I inherited a little bit of that. And then I've been doing videos and podcasts for almost a decade. So that'll kind of work these muscles to the point where I'm able to do this with a good sounding voice. But a big part of it is just, this is just how my voice sounds. I have a little bit of an extra polish to my voice when I do these videos. When I'm hanging out with friends, I probably talk a little faster and don't quite, I don't know. But anyway, so a lot of that comes into play. I know that probably sounds arrogant, but that's a part of it. There's so many people. There's a guy I was on the phone with last week or 2 weeks ago or recently, and he was saying, you should do a course. So I have lots of courses I've created. I've got 20 courses I've created over the last 9 years. He said, you should do a course where you take really bad recordings and you fix them. And I said, I understand the problem, and there are things you can do to enhance something that's been poorly recorded. If you just can't go back and re-record, or the person died and this is what you've got, there are situations where that makes sense. My first option is to go back and re-record it and record it well. And there are things you can do. But I told him, I don't know if I could do a course like that, because at the end of the day, I would say, all right, listen to how I transform this thing, and it's going to sound better but not great, because the recording did not sound great. So I'm not a miracle worker. I can't just do anything and make it amazing, right? At least the way I choose to work, which is, I think, the way most people want to work. They want to take what they've recorded and make it sound good. But the thing that you've recorded has to sound good to begin with, right? Okay. That was a long answer to a fairly straightforward, actually it was a pretty vague question, but we're good. Okay, Kip Buckner, what's up, Kip? Says, how much do you feel is an appropriate amount to spend per song if you're hiring musicians and such? Typical Nashville session, the rates are $75 an hour. So if I'm booking 3 musicians for the day, that's 2 3-hour sessions. If it's 4 musicians, if I'm booking 4 musicians for the day, hang on, let's do the math. It's $450 per person times 4. So when I do those tracking sessions you've seen me do at Steve Peffer's place, I'm paying $1,800 just for musicians for the day, and then I'm paying for the studio. So as you can imagine, the margins are tight if I'm selling these songs. But that's the Nashville rate, $75 an hour for non-major label master sessions, where it's like a demo kind of session. That's pretty typical. But I know people who'll do a song, they'll say, I'll record your song for $25. I've had people come in and they'll record for free. You just barter something. It's really, there's no standard, but maybe that gives you a place to work from. Now, remember, these are the kind of guys who we could lay down 7 or 10 songs, more close to 7, in that period. So whereas maybe a less experienced musician isn't going to be able to knock out as many songs, so you probably don't have to pay them as much, right? Part of what you're paying for with Nashville guys is they're so good that they can do things quickly. So you're paying for their experience. Sorry, I just talked about how great my voice sounds, and I'm coughing all the time. How do you deal with bleed on a mic from a guitar? When I want to mix the voice, the guitar is kind of in the middle. Well, if you've recorded the voice and the guitar at the same time, you've got to pan the guitar in the middle. That's your only option. If the voice is going to be in the middle, which it should be, you can't put the guitar off to the side. So you have to give that up. You can have an amazing sounding mix in mono. I was doing a song for somebody, and he wanted it to sound a little bit like Jack Johnson. I haven't listened to a lot of Jack Johnson, so I pulled up a few songs, and I noticed, even on the full band stuff where it's acoustic, electric, keys, bass, and drums, it was almost a mono mix. Everything was up the middle, and it worked. It sounded good. So while I'm a big fan of stereo and panning things around, mono can be great. Or have your guitar vocal up the middle and add some other interesting things on the sides to enhance the production. Another guitar part, a piano part, an accordion, a flute, a glockenspiel, you name it. I'm really sorry. I keep coughing all over you. This is my first time on your podcast. It was cool to catch the intro. Just getting back home in the groove. Well, great. Glad you're here. I thought there was a question in there. What do you think of the Studio Live plugins? I haven't tried them yet. I know they're out, and I think it's cool that they're out. I just haven't tried them. Bruce, what's up, Bruce? Says, I'm about to record a full session with drums in a new room. What should I listen for right out of the gate in terms of getting it right at the source? You should make sure, if you're in the room with the drums, that you record things down and then stop and listen to everything. So record it, then stop everything, tell them to stop playing, then sit down at your speakers, mute the mics, sit down at the speakers and listen through. Listen to the whole kit, listen to each individual thing, and make sure it works. In a big studio where the drums are in another room and it's isolated, you can do a lot of that. You can say, just hit the tom, and they hit it, and you're listening through the monitors, and you can tell if that placement is right. When you're in the same room as them, you can't really do that. You can set levels, you can get a general idea on headphones, but the best way, the only way, is to have them lay down something, and then you go back and listen. It takes an extra step, but it's worth it to not, if you don't have a booth, right? It's the only option. So have them play it down. It may take a little bit longer. Listen. And then if anything needs to be changed, make those changes, then do it again. Play it down, give me a chorus, a verse and a chorus, or just give me 10 seconds of drums, then go back and listen, then make adjustments. It's a little bit annoying, but it's really the only way to make it work. Sorry, I keep coughing. If your acoustic guitar, I lost it. This thing scrolls sometimes. Okay, this is from Donald. It says, if your acoustic guitar part is going to be barely noticeable in the mix, would you still record it like normal or just record it direct? Never record acoustic guitar direct. Direct acoustic sounds like butt. Never sounds as good. These are beautiful instruments that are made from wood that people somehow figured out how to make it curve, and they sound amazing. So you get all this, like an acoustic, it's a beautiful instrument, right? There's all sorts of wood happening everywhere. When you plug it in, you're hearing the sound of that bridge, and that's it. You're literally hearing what a piece of metal or something, a little magnet next to some metal strings sounds like. Even if you've got a great pickup, even if you've got the little mic inside the guitar, even if you've got that pedal that Fishman makes that's supposed to make it sound like a mic'd up guitar, it doesn't. So to answer your question, I would always record acoustic guitar with a microphone. Never. Now, there are situations where I've heard blending the finger style with the pickup can work. You're going to have phase problems if you do that. And again, it just doesn't sound good. I don't know why we would use it if it doesn't sound good. That's what I think. Mark says, that wasn't a question, so I'm going to keep going. How do I know when my vocal level is in the right spot? It's a great question. There's no real good way to know. Sometimes you just have to live with it, move on and come back, listen to it on a different system so you can hear it better. Turning the speakers down really low is helpful. That's more helpful to know if the vocal's getting too low because you lose it. If it's too loud, it's just hard to know. It depends on the song and the style of music and the way you like to mix. You and I could mix the same song, and my vocal could be louder than yours, but they could both work for the song. So it's just an experience thing. And listen to other mixes of other people in the same genre and see where their vocal sits, and then try to kind of emulate that as best you can. Norman says, Joe, I've got 9 mono mixes in my Studio Live 32 Series 3. I need to copy one monitor mix to the others. Can we do it on the board? No clue. Check the manual. Would you recommend using, this is from Eric, would you recommend using figure 8 pattern when recording the room with not optimal acoustics? The idea is that it would pick up less of the reflections. I get the point, but it's not going to pick up less of the reflections because the back of the mic is picking up everything behind it. So let's say we're in this room, which isn't necessarily treated super well. If I've got this microphone on my voice right now, chances are you're not hearing a ton of my room right now for a couple of reasons. One, I'm close to the mic. I mean, I'm not that far up, 3-4 inches away. And 2, this is a directional microphone. It's only picking up in this direction. The direction of my head is not picking up behind, and it is picking up some from the sides, but my voice is so close. If this was a figure 8 microphone, it would be picking up directly opposite of me as much as it's picking up my voice, which means arguably it would pick up more room sound. So no, I think figure 8s are great if it's a ribbon mic and you like the way the ribbon sounds, or if you're trying to capture more room sound, and if you want to use the null point. So if this is a figure 8 microphone pointing at me, it's not picking up sound from the sides here, but it is picking up sound from that way. So if you're trying to, some guys will use it, and I'm not going to use examples, just those would be the reasons. But no, if you're trying to eliminate room sound, directional mics are probably your best bet. You know directional mics are always your best bet. Because you're losing all your highs and lows. That totally sounds like a mixing tip. You're losing all your highs and lows. Okay, Harvey says, what's your opinion on miking all your cymbals? Splash, ride, China. Pros and cons? Obviously, you can get a great song without doing so. But would it be beneficial? So everything I've done on drums, it's overheads. Maybe a hi-hat mic, which I probably end up muting in the mix. But you can get the job done with overheads. For certain styles of music like metal, where it's big and heavy, and they do a lot of work on the hats and the ride, you may want to put a ride mic and a hat mic. But no, not every single cymbal. The phase issues that happen when you do that are not worth it. Plus, it's just a lot of mics to set up. So no, I would not mic every cymbal. There's no benefit there. And that's all assuming the drummer knows how to play in a way that's balanced and works well. Even if he can't, I still don't think I'd put up a bunch of mics. Celising says, I just grabbed a pair of Philips hi-fi speakers. What's your take on it? They're passive, wants to hook it up to a power amp. I don't know. I never heard of them. But as you'll notice, I've been using these for like a dozen years, and I'm just using them because they still work, and I can get good mixes on them. So if you can get good mixes on them, I say go for it. Robert Simpson, will you ever do an EP using only virtual instruments for instrumentation? It's possible, but I just like instruments in front of microphones. That's what I enjoy. That's what makes me excited, so probably not. Listen to... never mind. Ryan Greer. Man, y'all are bringing the questions. And they keep scrolling down, and I keep losing what I was going to say. Ryan says, I recently recorded drums and used a room mic in a big church sanctuary. The room mic is delayed quite a bit, so I moved it to be in time with the drums. Is that weird or wrong? It's not weird, and it may work. Like if you need the drums to be tight, but you still want a room sound, you can move that room mic up. I've done that before. I tend to, part of what makes a room mic awesome to me is the fact that there is a time delay. So I can't think of the last time I moved it up. I leave it. Now you want to EQ it and maybe compress the crap out of it. Might sound good if it's a rock song. But no, moving that one microphone is not going to be a make or break it thing. But I just wouldn't spend much time on it. If it's not working the way it is and you did a few things like EQ or compression, then maybe try moving it, but I wouldn't move it just because there is a delay. Sometimes that delay is what makes a room mic sound so great, right? Because you're hearing it later in time. Do you ever come to Ohio or Michigan to play shows? No, but I'd be open to it. Give me an invitation. When I try to export my beat, it says clipping has occurred. What should I do? Turn it down. Turn down your tracks. You're clipping too much. You can also put a limiter on the main bus, but I would turn your tracks down first because they're clipping somewhere in the middle. It's just all too loud. Turn that sucker down. And go watch my video on how to make your mixes louder. That'll explain the other part of how to get it loud without having things up to where they're clipping. Need to add a choir vocal at the end of a song. There's only me, and I know the trick about doubling, then do it again, but with a bit of time shift, but I need more than 3 voices. I need 4 to 5. Any tips? I've done all sorts of things like that. Just record yourself over and over. If you have the vocal range to do it, if it needs to be 3 parts or just a bunch of people, stand in different places in the room, face away from the microphone, sing different parts, sing with different voices, like you're making up voices. It can totally work. Easier thing is to get another person to sing with you or 2 more people and then double those. If you do it yourself, the problem is it's still going to have that same character of your voice, so it's never going to sound exactly like another choir. But what you're doing can work. You just need to record more tracks. Just double it more and more and more. What do you prefer, acoustic sound or digital sound? Well, I don't know what you mean. Do you mean like tape versus like recording into because it's all everything's analog. Digital sound can't touch my ears. My acoustic guitar is an analog device. This microphone is analog. The preamps are analog. Then it becomes digital and I mix it there, but then it has to come back out my speakers, which are also analog. So I like both. Digital means nothing without analog, but I don't record to tape. And I don't think it's necessary. Everything out there, not everything. I would bet you everything on the top 40 right now was not recorded to tape. Or at least a big majority of it was all done digitally. And guess what? It sounds great. So move on. Move on, make some music. How do you deal with calluses that build up to the point of peeling at the edges? Ooh. And they catch on the strings. You can get, my wife has this thing, it looks like a cheese grater. And I use it I get calluses on my hands right here from doing pull-ups. And when they get too big, they can rip. I know it's gross. They can rip on the bar, and then you have a bloody stump of a hand, and then you have to wait a while before you can do it again. So I'll use that to file them down. You can also use like a pumice stone that doesn't work very well, but that little file thing can work. Your fingertips are more sensitive, so it may just be like a normal fingernail file that's a little more gentle, or some soft sandpaper. Go see a I'm not joking. Go like get a manicure and have them. A lot of guitar players will get their fingernails done, so they're stronger for like the fingerstyle stuff on the right hand. So that's something to think about. You probably won't do it though. I'll be honest, I wouldn't have done it either. Joel says, "Hi Joe, I'm dumb. I'd like to know if you have a simple way to learn the Nashville charting, the one Steve Pfeffer has written out for your songs." I don't have. There is a chart on my a video on my YouTube channel called "How to Chart Songs." And I basically walk through that, I believe, in that video. It's been a while since I checked it. But I'll be doing a course fairly soon on that, so stay tuned. Can you give some ideas on dealing with the writer's block? Write. Just write more. Write every day. No matter what, just write anything that comes to mind. It can be stupid, it can be dumb. Sometimes you just have to do the action, and then the more inspired actions come later. Can you recommend any good headphones? Sennheiser, HD 280 Pros for recording, HD 650s for mixing and mastering if you want to spend a few bucks for some really nice sounding headphones. Rob Nordvik, what's up, brother? I recorded 2 distorted guitar performances using different guitars and amps, yet there still seems to be phase cancellation in mono. Any recommendations? You probably just had too similar of a tone. The thing about recording with 2 guitars and 2 different amps, if you dialed in almost the exact same sound, that can happen. But it's anytime you have wide guitars and you go to mono, it's going to sound quieter in mono. So that's partially normal. But I would just make the tones different, or different parts, different voicings. Maybe don't play the exact same chord in the exact same place. Maybe play it up the neck, down the neck, things like that. Joe, do you have a songwriting routine to keep yourself in creative vibe constantly, even when you don't feel like it? I don't. I go through phases. When it's time for me to release an EP, I will write a bunch of songs. The thing is, though, I'm not doing that once every few years. I'm doing it at least once a year. Last year I did it 3 times in a year. This year I've done it once. So no, I don't write every day, every week. But I'm always playing music on some level, whether it's playing the piano upstairs while the girls are dancing around, or playing on projects and stuff like that. What would be your opinion on miking a jazz group with close mics and a set of stereo room mics? I feel like jazz is cool because you're not expected to get anything unnatural. It's like the drum kit, if it sounds like a couple mics in a room, great. Even like I was listening to the Ray LaMontagne record, the first one he put out, those drums sound like they just like kind of were starting to put up mics and said, I'm lazy, let's just record these 2. But it kind of works and kind of sounds cool. I feel like jazz is even more forgiving. Granted, I've not recorded jazz, I don't think. But I would just go minimalist. I'd go kick, snare, overheads, and I'd really focus on those overheads being spot on, getting a good, like if I get the whole sound from the overheads, great, and then maybe a little bit extra kick for a little extra body, and snare would be just a nice bonus. And I probably wouldn't put anything on because I wouldn't put anything on the toms, because you don't typically hear do-do-do-do on toms on a jazz track, right? Now, if you've got the mics, go ahead and put them up there, but my focus would be on overheads, almost exclusively. Aw, Homestead loves me. Thanks for that. Soundcast Studios. I'm in a relatively small band right now. So, like, you're like physically small people? Because that's awesome. So I wonder, what's the best approach to releasing music? Album, EP, single? That's a great question. I don't know what's best. I know for me, I haven't done a full-length album in a while, but I've done a lot of EPs. To me, an EP is an easier thing to, like, wrap your head around. And an EP lets me test things out. So I could do, like last year, for example, I did a full band EP at the beginning of the year with a different drummer and bass player than I normally use, and I kind of heavily produced a lot of it. Then I did an acoustic EP where I only let myself use acoustic guitar and some percussion and my voice. And that was very different, and it was really fun. Then I did a full band thing that we tracked in 2 days in a studio at a friend's studio. So I got to do 3 rounds of creating music without having to make it be this really long project including 13 songs. I'm all for an album. I think albums are great, but I also like the idea of a quick EP where I do 4 or 5 songs and I get to do the process. So if ideally you do some EPs, you do some singles, you do some albums, if you haven't released music in a long time, set a goal to release a single in the next 30 days. Do that, and then maybe bump it up to an EP, and then do a couple EPs or maybe even an album. I'm out of time, I gotta go! You know what time it is. I'm not going anywhere. It's time for the after party. Welcome to the after party. This is where we let our hair down and we just keep doing what we've been doing for the last 41 minutes. Only it's, I don't know. It's about the same. I'm probably a little more snarky during the after party. Boom. So welcome to the after party. Don Hamer's here. What's up, Don? Ben Holmes is here. Basilio Raw Music, as always. Yeah. Kip Buckner's here. Love it. Is it just Eric with an extra I in there? Eric, what's your guess concerning PreSonus' supposedly big 22 of May release? Could it be Studio One version 4? I thought I heard rumblings about 4. I could probably find out if I called him, but then I'd have to not tell you. I've signed an NDA. But that's my guess. It's been a while since they did a release. They just announced all the new plugins for the mixer and the Fat channel. So that can't be it. And then DAW mode is out, which I still need to like really dive into. So I don't know. It's a good question. That's the only thing I can think of, unless it's some new interface. But that doesn't seem as that's not exciting to me. So I'm hoping it's something big like Studio One version 4. Yeah, Rob, if you're playing the exact same voicing of the chord, even with different guitars, it can be. If that becomes a problem, then yeah, switching it up, playing it down here, up here, switching it out can always be helpful. What's up, Humbucker? Wolf Villain says, can you do a video on how to mix with hardware gear summing? No, because I don't do that. It's great if you want to. I just don't. I would rather keep it in the box. I did run my mix through my stereo tube preamp that has line inputs. I did a video on that about 2 months ago. Go check that out, called Running Your Mix Through Tubes. That was kind of interesting, but not for me. A tea-making plugin. Johnny, I think you're absolutely right. Ever get away with not flipping the polarity of the bottom snare mic? Yeah, because the thing about it's like technically you should flip the top and the bottom, and usually it sounds better, but you know, if the top one was 3 inches away from the drum and the bottom one was 5 inches away, there's a chance that flipping it, because you're not actually aligning anything, you're just flipping the waveform. So a lot of times when you flip it, it's not necessarily, neither one is fixed, it's just one's closer to good than the other. But then, yeah, there's a chance you could flip it and you think, yeah, I like that sound better. It depends on the sound you're going for. For me, normally, if they're not in phase and I start flipping them, the snare goes from ch to choo choo, like it has some body to it. I like that. If you're in a particular production where you actually want it to be thin and gross, which is, go for it, then maybe you don't flip them. Or maybe it wasn't flipped when it was recorded, or it was flipped, and so you don't know, and then you look at the waveform, and then you check it, and yeah, I don't know. Yes. Any tips for recording a bluegrass band? If they're a really good band, you don't have to do much work. If they know when to play and when not to play on top of each other, just really good, getting really good core sounds on everything is important. Because bluegrass, you should not have to mix a lot. It should sound very natural. So don't plan to go do a bunch of crazy stuff and add a bunch of crazy reverbs or something. Keep it pretty true to the sound in the room. Can mixing and mastering be done together, and how much do you spend on a sound card? Well, around here we call them audio interfaces, and you can spend kind of any amount. If you're going super cheap, like a $67 audio interface, it probably doesn't sound great. You can prove me wrong. But a lot of people are spending, I'd say around $300 maybe. I've not shopped for one in forever. So this mixer is my audio interface. It's a lot bigger than probably most people need. And can the mixing and mastering be done together? Sure, you can do anything together. I prefer to do them separately. So you focus on one, give each one like your focus. Chris, stupid question about flipping polarity. Is it something you can and should do on the way in, or strictly an afterward thing? I do it on the way in whenever I think about it. So if I'm recording top and bottom snare, automatically flip the bottom one. If I'm recording 2 kick drum mics and we're listening, we realize it sounds better with one of them flipped, like they're more in phase when I flip one of them. I'll flip the second one so that it just goes to tape sounding better. I want to give myself every opportunity to not screw it up. So if I find something I need to do, I don't want to trust myself to remember later, I'll go ahead and flip it now. Or I'll flip it, put a plug-in on and flip it in the software. But I'd rather flip it now so I'm hearing it flipped on my board versus remembering to flip it later. Mark says, how are you doing today? I'm good. This morning was so I've been gone. I was gone all last week, and I took yesterday off because I've been gone all week, and I mowed the grass and hung out with Pam and the twins. And then this morning, I was super excited to get in here and do some work. And it was one of those mornings where, like, you ever just have those mornings where you are, you kind of doubt everything you do, or you have a lot of fear around anything because you just kind of aren't trusting anything you're thinking or feeling. It was one of those mornings. So that's why I like Ask Joe, is I can come hang out with you people and y'all make me feel better. So thank you. What's the keyboard behind you? Also, thoughts on Infinity War. Oh yeah, I'm wearing a Cap shirt. That's an old Yamaha Motif 8. Motif 8. I don't think it's ES. I think it's before ES. I mainly use it to trigger main stage on my laptop. Infinity War, I thought it was a great movie. Exhausting. And I won't do any spoilers, but it was... They went places I didn't expect them to go. Like, I expected some things, but then it happened way different than I expected. And it's cool. Like, I wasn't a comic book nerd, so my brother-in-law Joel... So I went and saw it with Joel and Tim the drummer, Joel the bass player, and they were big comic book guys, like, growing up. So they know all the backstory and, like, how the Thanos storyline played out in the comic books, and I know nothing. I just know what I've seen in the Marvel movies, and then what they've told me. So it's cool to see how they've, like, copied the comics in some things and not in others, and they've diverted it to make it interesting and different. There's just so many characters, and somehow it doesn't seem stupid. You know what I mean? Which is crazy. What genre of music do you listen to the most? Probably just anything with rock. But from folky, indie rock kind of stuff up to, like, just straight up, you know, Foo Fighters or whatever. Is the Apollo Twin a reliable audio interface? It seems like it. It seems like everybody has one. Some version of the Apollo. Is Spinal Tap before your time? I mean, I've seen it. I think it probably was. I was probably too young when it came out. When did it come out? I don't even know. But yes, I have seen it. I've been a touring musician for 15 years. August 21st, 2017, I did my life to the Lord, and now playing music for Him. Watching you has inspired me to do so many new things for the right reason. That's awesome, Marshall. Very cool. I would encourage you to not feel like you have to only play Christian music in order to be a Christian musician. I think a lot of people fall into that trap and think, I must only play songs that say the Lord's name over and over, or I'm not doing good work. And that'd be kind of like if I'm a surgeon and I only sew people up where the scar looks like a cross. Like, that'd be a little over the top, right? So I would say you can do good work without it having to be in the category of Christian, and I think that's still great. Just my 2 cents. When I duplicate tracks and pan them wide, naturally I'm getting phase issues, but my DAW won't let me flip just one of the copies. Any ideas why? Joel, go watch that video I did. You should never be duplicating tracks and panning them wide and flipping phase. That is a horrible, horrible idea. It will never sound good. So, your DAW won't let you because it shouldn't. Seriously, it sounds horrible. If you need it to be doubled or duplicated or wide, record it twice and pan them out. If you're not capable of doing that, then just let it be mono and be happy with it. Spinal Tap released May 4, 1984. Then yes, that was actually the year I was born. So yes, slightly before my time. I don't think my parents saw it while I was a baby and took me to the theater. Debating whether I should invest in a good tube mic, around 800 or so, wondering if it'll make much of a difference in my source material or my existing pretty good mics. You know, I'm a big fan of like the $300 range of mics and having a lot of different sounds. I'm not against a nice tube mic. I've used like the MA200 comes to mind. So good and so thick and so awesome. But sometimes a really good tube preamp gets you more mileage. Like if you're wanting thick and tubey, maybe like a 610 preamp from Universal Audio that then could make any of your brighter mics sound beefier and tubier. It's not saying you should do that, but it's something to consider. Any tips or tricks on how to play with a click? Lots of practice and listening back to what you did. And then if you can't do just to a, then try playing along to a loop and like a drum loop, and then something more simple until you can play to just a click. But it's just a practice thing. You're not going to get it. Some people obviously will get it more naturally than others. I was not one of those, and I'm still not fantastic at it, especially if I'm singing. But if I'm just playing, I've gotten to where I can play pretty consistently. You convinced me to put out an EP this July from what you did last year. Thanks for the inspiration. That's awesome, Donald. Let me know when that sucker's done. What should a good master file look like? Wait, what? Big fat sausage. I mean, most mastered music is going to be pretty flat looking, but hopefully there's some dynamic in between. If you zoom in, it's hopefully not all super slammed. Is there a noticeable difference between a real amp and the 11 rack, specifically for live use? The thing about live, David, and I've done it a couple times at my church, I played it live, is sound-wise, like if I'm using in-ears, it's about the same, but if I was going to a venue, I don't want to have my whole of my guitar tone coming out of the wedge, right? I want to be able to hear it on stage. That's a part of like rock and roll, right? So I'd much rather have an amp. But sound-wise, they're pretty close. Is it exactly the same? No. Does it work pretty well? Yeah, for a lot of sounds, it works really well. Your snapping sounded just like the intro to Killer Queen just now. Well, you're welcome. What do you use as a kick mic? What would you use a kick mic as a room mic? I mean, yeah, if it's the only mic you have, it could be cool. It could be noisier because they're waiting to hear really loud sounds, so anything not close to a kick drum might be kind of noisy, but that could be cool too. I'd say go for it. Anyone know the band Red? Yeah, I've heard a few things from them. They're heavy. I was almost 10 when Spinal Tap came out. #old. Oh, Johnny, you're not old. You're young at heart. We drummers say that you know you're on a click when you stop hearing it. And yeah, I know what you mean, Chris. I've been in sessions where the click disappears, and when you hear it, it's when you're off of it. Part of two for me has been trying to be more aggressive with my playing instead of playing lighter when I don't feel like I'm on the click, really digging in if it's like a strum thing and really trying to hammer that click with my down strum. And also focus on the down beats. The one of the measure is the most important beat of the measure. That's the one where you'll hear it the most, where if you're ahead of the kick drum there, that feels more awkward. So if you can really focus on that one being spot on, everything in between you can work on. But if the downbeat is great, then get that great first and then work on the others as you go. Ori, I don't think I've listened to it yet. I'm sorry. My emails I'm a little behind. Or maybe I did. I can't remember. What's the most important thing to invest in when first building a home studio? Currently using Scarlett Solo with a Rhodes condenser mic and headphones that came in the pack. It really depends on what you're trying to go for. If you don't have a good sounding guitar and you're recording guitar, that might be the next thing to invest in. If your room sounds horrible and everything sounds like your room, you might want to get some treatment or find a way to put up some stuff to absorb some of them sounds. But if the room sounds good, maybe it's something else. Or maybe you need to invest in some of my training courses. Boom! So you get better at using the tools that you have. That was a low blow, I know. Learn to wait for the one. It's longer than you think. That's a great advice, Johnny. Because, yeah, I'm always early on the one. And that sounds bad. Being late doesn't sound as bad. If I'm behind the kick drum, that feels better to me than if I'm ahead of him. Then it's like you're all standing out there by yourself. Using Superior Drummer, which has been recorded in perfect conditions, why would I go through a plug-in console? Does it hurt the sound? Kyle, I give the same answer when you're using virtual drums. If it sounds good, it sounds good. If it needs EQ, then EQ it. If it needs compression, compress it. I don't treat virtual drums any different than I treat real drums. I listen to them, and then I use my ears and my experience to tell me what to do next. Sometimes I don't need to do anything because they were recorded well and the samples are really good. But a lot of times those samples are treated a little bit, and I may want to go further with compression or whatever. So it's really no difference for me. Your acoustic and vocal course was fantastic. Oh, thanks, Gare. You're a doll. I've got something cool that I'm rolling out soon. It's basically a way to get all my courses for a 1 monthly price. If you're interested, email me, joe@homestudiocorner.com. I can fill you in on it. It's not public. My VIP members know about it, but everybody else doesn't. So I'll be rolling it out soon. It's not ready just yet. It's actually ready. You could buy it now, but the site isn't put up to like sell it yet. So Gare, yeah, I'll call you Gare all day long. Demad says, I just did what you said. I put a limiter on the master and I was able to export without it saying clipping has occurred. Thank you very much. You're welcome, but there's clipping occurring in there still somewhere. You kept it from clipping the main output, but your mix is too loud. You still need to turn your mix down. Then you can turn it back up with a limiter at the end. It will sound better. And it's good to not be dead on the click as long as you're playing ahead or behind on purpose. Sounds more human. Yeah. I mean, to me, as long as it feels good, and I usually prefer to be a little behind the beat if I can. That's just, not that I'm able to like say, I shall now play in front of the beat. I'm not that good, but yeah. Is it possible to have a sub or sine playing behind an 808 using an EQ, or are the bass frequencies too close together? I don't know. I don't know what frequency. I mean, I don't love the idea of a sine wave down there. You could trigger a sine wave to come in to give it more low end, but if it's an 808, it already has lots of low end. So I would listen to other stuff, compare it to stuff you like that has a big low end, and see if it's too much. Hey, do you like the Slate digital ML1 mic for several options? Will the software upgrade and become really good? I don't own it, so I don't know. I like the idea of having lots of options. I don't love the idea of being tied to the software. So if, God forbid, Stephen Slate dies and his company goes away, right? That was a little morbid. If his company goes away for whatever reason, you no longer have support for that. So company goes away, your software still works. Then a year from now, Apple releases the new, high Himalayan OS update. You update that, you update your DAW. Oh, now your mic doesn't work anymore. And the company doesn't exist anymore to give you an update. Those are the things I worry about more. Like this microphone in front of me will always work, right? As long as it doesn't physically break, which they can be repaired, I don't need any software to make this work. I just need a preamp with phantom power. I like that a little better. That said, maybe you don't care and you're confident that Slate's going to be around. I'm confident Slate's going to be around. I may try out one of those mics at some point. I've got a set of mics that work for me, so I just get back to making music. But I do like, just like the 11 rack, I like, even if it doesn't sound exactly like the thing it's trying to emulate, it still sounds cool, and it's got a lot of different sounds, which is cool. The thing I hesitate too about those mics is it would be possible to sit there for an hour switching between models, and you could just spend all your time trying to find the best sound, but never make music. I don't like that idea. Do you use any DSP accelerator cards or outboard gear? No, I don't. I record through the Studio Live that has built-in processing that I sometimes apply to the track, like a 1176 style compressor sound or something, but no, I don't have any accelerators, except the one in my car. Jimmy says, what vocal mic do you like best for your voice? I love the SM7B. Mine hasn't been working for a while. I need to like resolder something. This mic, the Roswell Pro Audio Mini K47, it's $300. You hear it right now. It already sounds delightful. Everything I've sung on in the last year, so all my EPs last year, I think they were all done through this mic. Through a tube preamp, to be fair, but I really like the way this mic sounds, especially when you get up nice and close. Simon says, last time I asked about overuse of compression, and you said mix without compressors at all. I did it and won a Reddit music production contest. That's amazing, Simon. That's incredible. First of all, you won the contest, but if I had a little part to help with that, that's awesome. Dude, it's really interesting. Like, Ronan, I was at that retreat last week with him, and he was talking about sometimes he'll sit down with people who have these mixes. He'll go to their studios, and they'll say, why does my mix sound so bad? He'll open their session and just start disabling plugins. And they'll be like, oh my goodness, it sounds so much better, because he just took half the stuff off. Isn't that crazy? Basilio says, how can I remove reverb from a recorded clip example, vocal or drums? I got it that way. Didn't record it. Sorry for repeating. No problem. I assume things like RX can remove some of those. I've heard somebody on one of these shows in the comments talked about something that'll remove reverb. So given the crazy tools we have available to us, I bet there's one out there by some independent plugin company that'll do it. I would just Google around. I don't know of anything. I wonder, my question would be, is it in the mix? Can you hear it in the mix? Or is it just in solo? If you can just bury it somehow with a little EQ and the way you treat it, it may not be a problem. But if it's a pretty prominent thing and you've got to remove it, Jim says Isotope RX6 has a reverb remover tool, and then Brainworks has something called Deverb. So I wouldn't have any expectations on those because it's baked into the track. That's kind of stinks. So, and like they said, it depends. So I wouldn't spend money on it. I'd probably try to find a different sample, unless it's one of those once-in-a-lifetime samples or you're reworking like an old song from the 60s where there's just huge amounts of reverb on it, but you want I don't know. But if you're willing to spend some money on it, you can try those things. I bet they have demos you can try and see if it works. Any thoughts on recording DI electric guitar with amp and cab plugins on the track? Anything to be careful of? The only thing I would be careful of is not finding the right sound to start. I would treat it as if you have amps in a room, find the right sound and record it, and then I would print that to a track. So I would render it with the sound just like you would record an amp with a microphone. And if you want to save the DI for later, if you really need to go back and the problem I have with it is people will use that as an excuse to tinker for days and days and days. They'll be mixing the song and say, I don't like that guitar tone, and instead of reaching for an EQ, they'll go change the amp tone again. And if you change the tone on the amp, it's going to change how the entire performance sounds. So I would much rather leave it alone. Now, are there situations where, oh, there's just too much gain, let me turn it down because it's not working for the mix? Yeah, you can do that. I'd prefer, honestly, in that situation, I would almost prefer to record it in. That's what I do with my 11 rack. It's not a plug-in. It's literally just a piece of equipment. I run analog out of the back of it into my mixer and record the sounds. So if I mess something up on the way in, I've got to go re-record it. It's kind of a way of punishing myself and bigger picture, forcing myself to focus on the task at hand and getting it right at the source, like we say. Is there anything wrong with recording a DI so you have a backup in case you need to reamp? Absolutely not. And if you like that kind of work, great. I just know it can be a black hole of sucking up all your productivity because you spend all your time second guessing everything. Making decisions is hard enough. Recording a song from song demo to finished master already takes 1,000 million different decisions anyway. I don't want to add more decision points to the process. So if there are places along the way where I can make a decision once and never have to make it again, I'm going to go for that. Is it scary? Sure. Will you jack things up sometimes? Absolutely. But you'll get better at it. And worst case scenarios, you have to re-record it. That's not, unless the person has passed away and is no longer with us, that's doable. Do modern genres like hard dubstep and trap require high quality mixing or just bass and middle frequency mixing? I think any music requires good mixing because a good mixer will know what the track needs to make it work, to make it sound like everything else in the genre, to make it stand up next to all the professional releases. They'll also know when to leave stuff alone. But given modern music like dubstep, trap, even like a lot of pop stuff, a lot of it is based on like software sounds. So a lot of the mixing is kind of happens during the production, right? So the sounds are already there versus like a rock mix where I've really got to do some work to the drums to get them to sound like a rock drum set. When you've just triggered everything off of, you know, all the whatever sample libraries that you use, there's not as much mixing to do in general. But you still need a good ear for that and know how to make things translate. And you still got to get a good balance. Mix is about balance. So no, it's not about just certain frequencies. Have you ever tried listening to Enema of the State? The vocals in that album are so tight, I wonder if they use something like Vocal Line. I wouldn't be surprised. Like, people have been aligning vocals and tightening things up for sure. It could be that he's just that good. Could be a combination of both. What kind of insulating materials are you using in the gobos? I didn't make them. I assume it's Owens Corning 703, but I didn't make them, so I don't know. How do I make my mix loud after it sounds great on the HS8 and then I plug it into my hi-fi receiver and it sounds really dull? Also, car playback is super low. Go look up a video I did recently called how to make your mix louder. It'll talk about using a limiter just to get the volume up to where you can hear things okay in the car. It's not mastering and you shouldn't go crazy with it, but you can get some volume out of there with just that. As far as it sounding dull on your hi-fi receiver, go watch a video I did called Why Does My Mix Sound Crappy in My Car? Someone asked a similar question, and it's probably because you just need more experience mixing. You need to practice more, do more of it, and you'll learn how to mix it to where it sounds good everywhere. But it's a frustrating process, and if you are frustrated, you are in the right place. Like, you're doing it right. Just keep doing it. Everybody goes through that for sure. You're welcome. Okay, it is 2:05 my time, so I need to duck out of here and figure out what I'm going to do with the rest of my day / life. I'm kidding. Because your mixes sound low. Okay. Oh, thanks, Josias, if you're talking to me. It is. I've been blessed to be able to have some cool toys over the years, and I get to make lots of music, which is fun. And I don't have a record label telling me how to make it, or what to make it, or when to not do it. I just do what I want, which is great, right? That's the dream. So anyway, I'm out of here, folks. Thank you so much for hanging out. I will see you next week, Tuesday, 1 p.m. Central. Come hang out again. Let's do this soon. Bye.